I want to introduce you now to John Hutchinson. John is the chair of the Isle of Eigg Heritage Trust. He's also chair of a lot of other organisations, including the John Muir Trust, and hence, like all of our speakers, an incredibly busy individual. So we're extremely grateful that John's made the time to be with us today. So if I can hand over to John, please, and you'll tell us the story of the journey of Eigg. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rona. And Peter's talk was certainly inspiring, and the big message for me is that there's an example, an illustration of a problem the size of the local authorities in this country, and it's the case for having smaller, more local authorities. Right, so let's just see what happens here. Nothing so far.
If you point it slightly towards the back.
Points the back, okay.
Then it should work fine.
Okay, right.
That's a second ago.
Okay.
Try it again.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
For some reason it
Okay,
doesn't
right,
work.
that's fine. Right,
Sorry,
we're on there.
John.
Right, that's me. We're part of a double act here with my friend John Booth, and John will deal with the technical side of the business. I'm a civil engineer, but John was the mastermind behind this particular project. So that's not working out. I'll try arrow down. Let's try page down. This one, right? Okay. Right, here we are. We got started at last. So the Isle of Eigg is up in the northwest of Scotland. There, the area in yellow is the area of Lochaber. Before I retired, I was initially the divisional road engineer for that area, and then latterly the area manager in the devolved local authority there. So Eigg is this is Eigg from the north, a tremendous landscape. You can see the feature here that gives us its name. Eigg comes from the Gaelic Eiggach, meaning the notched island, and this is the scour of Eigg here. This is the tip of Ardnamurchan, the westernmost point in the British mainland in the far distance. So this is looking from north to south. The people generally live around the bay here. If you land on Eigg, you land at the pier down there. So that's where we are. This is the scour of Eigg, the 1,200 feet high pitch stone. You might say that's a really bonny house down at the front there, and it is, of course, and that's where my friend John stays. So someone asked at breakfast, did you have a view? Did you have much of a view? And John said, well, not much out the front, but we've got a phenomenal view out the back. So there you are. And this, my talk is about developing a fragile community, and John will deal with the technical aspects of the scheme. And of course, if you live on an island like Eigg, 12 miles off the mainland, a population of 90 odd people, you really have to be a very resilient community. Everything gets decided, it's a community-owned island, everything gets decided at meetings, and my old school motto of persevere is very much to the fore. And the whole idea of having the power to determine your future. You get up in the morning and you've got to work out who's going to solve the problems that day, and the person that's going to solve the problems that day is the person who is looking at you in the shaving mirror. And that applies to the women as well. Once you've seen the women, I didn't really say that. And but conflict resolution is an important part of this, because the people who live on the island, whilst they'll argue and the like, they've got to live with each other tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and that's how sustainable decisions actually get taken. So within the trust, and I'll come to the structure of the trust shortly, we had a 10-year plan that looked at these major themes for the community, the natural heritage, the economy, the community itself, and infrastructure. And the natural heritage is hugely important for our tourism market. We get something like 8,000 or 9,000 visitors a year that come to see the island. So retaining that beautiful landscape is really important as well. A couple of years ago, we were threatened by a potential fish farm just off the coast, and there was virtually unanimous opposition to that, because that would affect our credibility as a green island. So 12 miles off the mainland, and that's why A submarine electricity cable was never installed. It was looked at by the electric board several years ago, but it was deemed to be too expensive. And I think that's actually been the saving of the island in the fullest of time, because as Peter said, the money now stays within the community. It doesn't go to well, probably Spain in our case. So the island was bought by the community in 1997. There was a UK appeal. It cost £1.3 million, and there are now 98 residents there. There were 63 at the time of the buyout, so a huge number of returners, a huge number of other people come to Eigg because they want to live there, and something like 30% are under 35. So the way the island is organised, there's a charitable parent company that owns the island, the Isle of Eigg Heritage Trust, and it works in partnership with the Eigg Residents Association, and I'll return to that in a minute. So if you think about a structure with a charitable parent company that owns trading companies underneath that, and the trading companies, the intent of them is to generate the business, generate the wealth for the charitable parent. And the main activities on the island, as you'd expect, are tourism, some farming, some construction, fishing, and support services. So, Isle of Eigg Heritage Trust is a charitable company limited by guarantee. It's a 3-member company. It's not the conventional model, with the Residents Association, the Scottish Wildlife Trust as the environmental partner, and the Highland Council as the 3 members. And each of those bodies nominate directors onto the board. And at one time, those numbers there of 4, 1 and 1 were 4, 2 and 2. And there was a need for an independent chair, 4 from the island and 4 from the mainland. And I'm now the 3rd independent chair, and I've been the chairman since 2007. And I don't live on Eigg. And this has been kind of much discussed on the island as to whether the islanders want to have a chair who is not resident on the island, and there are arguments pro and against that, as you can imagine, but so far they still want to have an independent chair who gets involved in bits of arbitration and whatever, and there's also someone to blame actually who's not there, so that's kind of handy too. So the Heritage Trust wholly owns the trading companies. We appoint and can remove the directors from these companies, and they kind of do what it says on the tin there. The trading company owns the houses and the tea room and the like, the construction, does refurbishing work on our own houses and our own and the school and that sort of thing, and the electricity company will come to that. So prior to 1997, on Eigg, people who lived there had no security. The landlord was substantially absentee. If people wanted to remodel their kitchen or whatever, they couldn't get a bank loan because they had no lease or anything like that. There were really poor relations with the public authorities. The landlord was in conflict with the council, etc. So things like the pier wasn't getting built, the school wasn't getting renovated, and that sort of thing. Community morale was really low. There was one person who was a landlord's representative there, and everybody else was unhappy. And now we have a situation where about 1/3 of the people living on the island work for the community, either in a paid, if you're in a paid role, but mostly volunteer for community activities. So there's been a huge change around in community morale and ownership of what's going on. So on energy on Eigg, prior to 2008, when the scheme started, people had individual diesel generators. There were some small hydroelectric schemes. There was a coal club, and the bulk of the island was designated as having fuel poverty, and you know how that's defined, and a huge carbon footprint, of course. But since the buyout, the population's increased by 50%. We've been renovating houses. We've created farm partnerships. There's been a new build shop, tea room, craft shop, and that sort of thing. We're creating housing plots and releasing them at a very slow rate, so there's not an influx of people, and these are released at 2 a year, generally on a shared equity basis. We've also renovated and extended the community hall and done on various other things there about the storage sheds, improved machinery storage, created new crafts, and most importantly for today's talk, taken forward a community electricity scheme which has led to broadband, which has led to flexible working, people being able to live on the island of Eigg and work in the world somewhere. So this is where the people live, as I mentioned previously. John lives at the south end there, near toward Galmasdale. And this is the size of the electricity scheme. This is a very, very low-key scheme, and John will talk about the technical aspects of this. But fundamentally, it's about generating from hydro, then by wind, and then by photovoltaic cells. And if all of that doesn't work, then there's battery backup, generator backup. The grid, John will talk more about that, but the grid extends to the whole extent of the island. People said to me, is it a funding condition that it had to be undergrounded? The answer is no. The islanders wanted it to be undergrounded for environmental reasons, and that's how they set out to do that. So the hydro is up here at the north end, the wind turbines are down at the south, the control, the battery, the diesel and the like is in the centre of the island. This is how it's set up, and very important in our talk today is agreement to live within a 5 kilowatt hour limit. And each house voluntarily, prior to this scheme being set up, each household agreed to cap their usage at 5 kilowatt hours and each business at 10 kilowatt hours. And that, to my mind, is really the big story. It wasn't a voluntary agreement. If they exceed that, then the switch trips and there's a £25 reconnection charge. There's a little meter in your house, and it goes bleep bleep, and when you come close to the limit. So, contrary to some other community-owned islands, we're not setting out to, probably because of our distance from the mainland, we're not setting out to generate electricity and connect to the grid and make money for the community. We're interested in creating a sustainable community. So this is very low key, and the big story, as I said a minute ago, really is the voluntary agreement to limit our use. So that is the burn. We call it the burn, as you know. That's pretty small. There's a lot of them around the country that could keep communities going. These are, what, 28 feet is it to the hub, John, and 8 feet diameter. Really very small. John will speak about all of this. Okay. So it was opened in February 2008. It cost £1.7 million. In total, electricity started at 15 pence a unit. It's now 21, I think. But we started to ask ourselves questions once the scheme was almost finished, whether the Eigg model could be transferred to elsewhere. And following the First Minister's discussion with the President of the Inter-America Development Bank, I spoke to some of their directors in Washington, D.C., and they came from D.C. to Eigg. They came from Ecuador, Canada, and what they call the Caribbean to look at our model and the transferability of that to the Americas. And people asked about all this public money going into a community like Eigg, and was that justified? Well, our scheme was 1.7 million for 87 people to produce 146 kilowatts at the time. And another scheme, a bit of a distance away, cost 1.8 million for 30 people. And of course that was in South Georgia. And for strategic reasons, the British government thought it was a good idea to put money. So you've got to ask the question of why you're doing it. Are you trying to sustain communities, or are you trying to retain political power across the globe? And we asked the question, should communities get involved in micro schemes, or should we let the power companies do it? And is the driver making money or creating sustainable electricity? So along came the Big Green Challenge, and the Big Green Challenge was something that was set up by NESTA, the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts. This was a UK-wide competition, so 64 million people, or communities across 64 million people could apply for this, and the whole intent was to find a community that could reduce its carbon footprint by the greatest amount over a 12-month period. And the prize was £1 million. So we thought, that's kind of worth trying for, and we set out to do that. And there were 355 communities across the UK entered for this competition, and a lot of data on this slide here, but the important thing to note is that we had a lot of community meetings on the island to decide whether we were going to go into the Big Green Challenge. 355 applied across the UK. Gradually it was screened down to 100 communities. Gradually it was screened down to 21 communities. A number of us went to London to do a pitch to the Big Lottery and the NESTA judges. and we became a finalist. So we were one of 10 finalists across the UK, the only Scottish finalist there, and that was really the start. I mean, it was a lot of work to get to that stage, but that was the start of the process, because we then were audited over a 12-month period. Some families opened their domestic books to demonstrate their purchase of fossil fuels and that sort of thing. We appointed a project officer to take us through this period, put in place a green team to encourage ideas. And the final calculation over a 12-month period was that we reduced our carbon footprint from down by 42%. The initial calculation was 32. We had a big argument then with Nesta, and they managed to accept our figures that it was 42. So that was a really interesting period, but it was also very hard work. But it also brought people together, and we were talking last night at the dinner about how you put a price on cohesion in a community. And from our point of view, this has been the one big project that's actually united people more than anything else. And the concept that we tried to put forward in the Big Green Challenge was that Eigg would be the first of 1,000 green islands, because it's unique. And the key to trying to get our message across was, with our 8,000 visitors a year, we reckon that everyone leaves a bit of their heart on the island. Everyone knows what I'm talking about here. And that's the key to replication, that people will want to do something on the lines of what we've been doing on Eigg. And our argument at that time is that you don't need to be an island to be a green island. This building could be a green island. Your street, a little cul-de-sac, could be a green island with people working together, or your extended family could be a green island. And this is what we tried to transmit across. This was one of the slides that we showed to the big people in the lottery. John will be amused. We tried to claim that this was the way people were on an Eigg: hardy, resilient, positive, tolerant, John, hard-working, consultative and cooperative. And well, you'll forget you saw that there, but we tried to, anyway, we convinced the lottery people, and they kind of let us go forward. So we did a big survey of fossil fuel usage, as you would expect, as the baseline, and we were audited over that period. One of the interesting things that was done was a solar water heating pilot, moving people away from coal, kerosene and wood, and that was done very successfully. So this was the idea. Eigg is the first green island. Let's try to engage with the visitors that we get there through merchandise, information, presence on the internet, and then get the story across the rest of the world, so that the whole idea of green islands would extend across the country. So that was the plan. Whether it's worked or not, I don't know, but that's, as Peter said, is kind of what this event is all about. So Eigg has always been about, since we started in '97, about trying to create a sustainable community, not about making money. The Big Green Challenge was a huge unifying force. 76% of the households were involved in coming together to put ideas forward and work together over that period. And the whole philosophy of sharing, food sharing and that type of thing came forward there. And the monitoring through the screen was really put together by red and green cards in the shop window. If we were short of electricity, as I say, John will talk about the technical aspects. I'm kind of around the edges here. A red card would go up in the shop window to let people know that there wasn't a lot of resource, and green if there was. So people have been to Eigg from all around the world, from Alaska, Indonesia, Galapagos, etc., to see what we're doing there. And we thought about this as we were going through the Big Green Challenge, and what would we do with the money if we won? And well, we would certainly put in more photovoltaic cells, and we would try to get some diversification in the wood fuel business, that sort of thing. We'd think about community transport. We would build a house for volunteers, that sort of thing. And then we kind of dreamt about it, but we did win. Well, we were a political winner, as is the nature of these things. The prize was £1 million, so as was the nature, There were three first equals. Curiously, one from the other side of Offa's one from this side of Offa's and one from Scotland. So I don't know how that happened, but it seemed to be, on merit, I was told at the time. So if you imagine kind of 10, you can divide 10 by 3, and you've got one left over. So we've got £300, and one runner-up got £100,000 for reducing our carbon footprint by 42%. So a list of awards, not as long as and impressive as Peter's, but important to us. John is always going away to award ceremonies. So this is us putting in some additional photovoltaic cells. And we've no longer got the red and green cards in the window. We've got a little light that comes on. And this, John will talk about this more, but we're now averaging something like 85% generation from renewable sources. So the idea of transferability is important. Other communities can look at this kind of model, not necessarily generating from hydro, wind and photovoltaic, but it could be tidal, solar, whatever, in what the Americans call the Caribbean. And you don't need to limit your use to 5 kilowatts. And I met someone from Sri Lanka once at an energy conference, and he said, tell me that story again, because in Sri Lanka, they're working around the island building new hydroelectric schemes. So they move into one valley, they build a hydroelectric scheme, and within a few years, the anticipated demand has gone because people buy a whole lot of white goods and the like. So they went back to Sri Lanka with this idea that when they went to the next valley, they would do a deal and that people's usage would be capped to 5, 10, 15 kilowatt hours, whatever it was going to be. And that was the deal, so that they could then be confident about the longevity of their plant. So even that simple idea is transferable as well. So key points in all of this, John will talk about the redesign of the scheme that was very important because we were almost going in one direction and then decided to go another. Each of the private houses on the island had to have their wiring checked to IEE standards. The decision to restrict to 5 kilowatt hours is really important. We don't have baseball bats on Eigg, so prepayment of electricity was important as well, as was the imperative that we had to have 100% sign up before we went ahead with the scheme. As I mentioned, it's been a huge unifying force on the island. And a little cryptic comment about Lochaber House meeting at the bottom there. The other key point in all of this is when we were starting to move ahead with the scheme, we had a meeting in the council office in Fort William, and we were trying to work out how to manage this project. This was probably almost the first time that I'd met John Booth, and we were trying to think about the project management structure, and John, in his own quiet way, said, I think I could do that, if you like. And that's a really, really important part, and the whole of this scheme was John's ability and dedication to bring people together and take us forward, and I cannot praise him too highly, and I'll move on before I start to cry. So the whole community land movement is a really big thing in Scotland. We have all of these communities aspiring and now buying their own community, and it's very important to be able to take those local resources into local ownership. It was a big struggle. We kind of run a kind of regular war with the Hickey column in the Daily Express. I'm sure many of you read that avidly, but they kind of do us down in every possible opportunity. But part of the kind of general endorsement here was to try to get a royal visit. So we actually got a royal visit, surprisingly enough, and a special pipe tune there. And I found a kilt, and John actually found a tie to put on. So that was kind of that was a nice day. So we're doing other things within the community and sustainability. People go there to contribute to the common weal. Beekeeping, obviously you can look at websites. There's a super film on YouTube. You'll never write all that down, the symbols in time, but if you do a search on YouTube for renewable energy for the Isle of Eigg, you'll find a pretty good film about it all. Obviously our website is pretty good, and the website was built by a web business based on the island, a couple of young lads who couldn't have done this, without permanent, sustainable electricity on the island. They couldn't have had this business, but they do it, and they work elsewhere. So a good dynamic website. Part of it is about the green electricity scheme. Part of it is about how Eigg used to be. How these people can envision how we're living now. But of course, as Peter said, come to visit us. There are lots of really interesting things to do on the island. We enjoy gathering together. The island parties we party really well, as you can imagine. But of course, this is what it's about. It's about the young people, and it's about the future. This was our 10-year anniversary dinner, a very civilised affair there. We had tablecloths and knives and forks and speeches. And it's interesting because with the turnover in the community, people actually forgot about the hardship of the days in the past and the struggle through the buyout. And as I said, this is what it's about. Okay, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, John. Again, another hopefully inspiring story, and we've left it on a bit of a cliffhanger so that we'll go for a coffee break and intrude.